You're officially invited to join the inner circle of top leaders from all over the country. Listen and learn as these obsessed entrepreneurs reveal the secrets that led to their success. Welcome to the community. Today's episode starts now.
What is up, everybody? I'm super pumped to be here today. I have an awesome guest. So welcome to the community. I have Suzanne Justice, and she is with Blake Ryan Consulting, and she's going to give us her expert and obsessed opinion about job market, where it is right now, because we know that that kind of affects a lot of things that we do in the real estate industry. But thanks for being here, Suzanne. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
I am good. So I do want to give some backstory. We are related, and you are the cousin of my beautiful wife. And
favorite cousin.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think she has many, so that's, almost by default, I guess, right? No, but Suzanne, she has been in the recruiting industry for a long time, and so she's going to give us some really awesome insights. And we're just going to kind of break it down from her perspective, because I don't know much about recruiting. So, but Suzanne, tell me a little bit about you, how you kind of got started recruiting, and maybe a little backstory.
So I have been in staffing and recruiting for 18 years, which makes me feel very old when I tell people that. I actually started because I lived in San Diego, and I was moving back to Washington, and I had my real estate license, and I was doing real estate, and I wanted to just do something in between closings. So I took a job as a part-time receptionist at a dental staffing company. And 3 weeks in, their hygiene recruiter left, and I'd kind of been watching. I was kind of interested in it. So I asked the owner if I could try it, and she said, sure. And I jumped right in, and I had basically built her hygiene department with the most fills and the most revenue she's ever seen. So I did that. I did that for probably 2 years. Decided I really liked it, stopped doing real estate. And then I had gotten to a point with her company where it was so small, unless I purchased it, there was nowhere I could go. And so I started applying to the really big companies in Seattle. And
okay. There you go. Sorry, you froze for a second.
Oh, okay. Where'd you lose?
So what were we saying? So just back up a little bit when you after you moved, you left real estate.
So I left real estate, and I started full time as recruiting, and I started applying at the really big corporations in Seattle, and that's how I essentially got into it. And I've been there ever since.
So as far as when you started in recruiting, so what year was that?
That was in 2006.
Okay, so you kind of saw, well, you were in recruiting during kind of like the bubble popping and everything in 08. So as far as like where jobs were and everything, like how did that, like, do you see any correlation to kind of where we're at right now in the economy and kind of where, interest rates are obviously high and things like that? Is there any correlations that you saw in the job market? What was it like?
I don't see it. I see a little bit here and there. It was a lot different back then, though, because you didn't have the ability to work remotely. And it was a lot more brick and mortar. It was bad. I mean, when it was 2008 is when it all started, and the staffing industry was one of the first industries that took a big hit. And I mean, I was working at Nordstrom's and opening Neiman Marcus in Bellevue until it kind of reestablished itself back in about 2010. So I think what you're seeing now and a lot of the layoffs is kind of almost like the market righting itself a little bit. A lot of these corporations planned on this huge growth, and they overstaffed themselves by probably 30%. And now they're having to go back saying, hey, you know what? We didn't grow as much as we thought we would, as quickly as we thought we'd scale. So now we've got to kind of do a right of staffing, if you will. And that's why you see a lot of these tech companies starting to lay people off.
Yeah. And I it was funny during when there was the craziness of people hiring, and you saw like Facebook and Twitter and all these, obviously they were hiring a bunch of people before, Elon, and he came in and kind of just dismantle it all because he's like, what is everybody doing? But I always, is it one of those things in that industry or that side where, especially when it's like really, really like, I know we were in a really good economy, So is it one of those that you see like with companies or companies that they kind of see what the other person is doing? Because in some sense, the more that they hire kind of shows that, hey, look, we're having growth. Like we are productive. And so I feel like I see that, you'll have Facebook and they'll say, we're hiring this many. And then you'll see, oh, we have Twitter, or we have, all these other tech companies. They start hiring too, to kind of like, keeping up with the Joneses style. I mean, do you see that in the market as far as tech companies like competing on hiring? How many people are hiring?
Yeah, you do. And it's funny because especially with like the startups, when they're just getting like ramped up, they want to show that they're going to be successful. They want to show that they're going to be liquid. So they hire all these people to say, look at us, look at how much we're growing, look how fast we're growing. We're going to make billions of dollars, invest in us. And then they get to a point where they're like, wait a second, we way overscaled this, or we weren't anticipating that the rates were going to go up. The housing market's changing. Now everything else is changing, or we're in a pandemic. And now what do we do to kind of right side all of that from getting back? Because a lot of these companies still are not 100% back in offices. And I've always said that the 100% remote, it doesn't work. It's not sustainable for every company. It may work here and there for some different positions, but it's not going to be sustainable long term. And I think a lot of those corporations are now seeing that too. You've got Amazon coming back. You've got Microsoft pulling people back in the office. Google is coming back. And they were all big proponents of working from home 100% remote.
Yeah, even here in Austin, I remember. So they were building the tallest skyrise in Austin, and I think Facebook, they were like, hey, basically they owned it. Essentially, they were like, we're going to staff the whole thing, and then they pulled completely out because they're like, no, we're not doing it anymore. And I feel I have a couple friends that are in the tech space, and the amount of layoffs they've had in the last year has been just absolutely insane. But I also have some friends that are or were in the recruiting, and the recruiting like jobs are, when the job market goes, the recruiting jobs go also, right?
Yep. So typically what you'll find is when they start looking at departments to lay off, normally it's marketing's number one. That's usually the first one they cut. Then they'll start cutting sales, and then they'll start cutting internal recruiting, because if they're not growing, they're not hiring, so they don't need their internal recruiters. It's interesting because some companies don't really see staffing as a value add, agencies, as if you will, but we save them a lot of money. We save people a lot of issues when it comes to layoffs, having to pay unemployment, having to pay all the unemployment taxes, having to be liable for those people when they do get laid off. So there are a few companies who kind of shift to more contingent during these times. If they get during hiring freezes, they'll shift to staffing companies to help them, because it also doesn't hit a lot of their bottom line. But it's interesting to see the different companies and the different industries. All the industries are different. It seems like you have the most layoffs in tech, because I do think that, like I said, tech always overstaffs.
Okay. So what space are you primarily in, or do you kind of float around different spaces?
So when I started my business 5 years ago, I decided that I wasn't going to specialize. And it's funny, everybody asks me, what's your specialty? So, I used to run the largest teams in Washington, Oregon for the second global largest staffing company. And we always said, oh, we specialize in this. But I don't really think you specialize in something unless you've actually done that job. So I can teach a recruiter, what a CEO does. It doesn't mean that they can be a CEO, right? So I basically work with what my clients need. So right now we do a lot of hospitality staffing for corporate companies who sit on large corporations, universities, hospitals. We do a lot of finance and high-level finance, CFOs, VPs of corporate finance. We do a lot of HR customer service positions. It really kind of just depends on what our clients need, and we can really work and fill anything in any department they have.
Got it. So with that being, what are some of the, and you probably can't say, but what are some like, do you have any clients that right now that you just see are just hiring like crazy now? Are you seeing like an uptick? And I guess, last year was probably pretty insane as far as on the recruiting side too, of where you guys were. I know from what I've heard is that, they weren't recruiting. So as far as owning your own, like, it's one thing to work for somebody, yep. But when you own the business of recruiting and you're like, okay, well, like, yeah. What was last year like?
It was horrible. I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Last year was our worst year in 5 years. And I was really excited to get through it. One, because, it's as we were hitting our 5-year benchmark, I was doing a lot of research on small businesses and like how do they get to that point? How many get to that point? And 49% of small businesses make it to 5 years. So I was excited about that, but then I was also excited to make it through the worst year we've ever had. The beginning of the year, it was just, we had such excitement for people getting back to work. They didn't get back to work. Everybody was anticipating, everything was going to ramp up. It didn't ramp up. And so middle of the year through summer was probably, the worst months we've had. And then it upticked in August and everything started picking back up again, which was amazing. But it's tough. It is. It's hard to own your own business. When I started, I realized, oh, you know what? Payroll has to come from somewhere. It comes from me. I don't just put it into a system and someone magically pays all these people. Yeah. I have to make sure all of the background screening is like, there's a lot that goes into it you don't realize. And so it's stressful. It's really stressful to keep something going and then to stay motivated and keep that drive and not, there are times where you're like, just forget it. Like, I'll just go work for someone else again. But then, when I get to that point, I start job hunting and I look at all the positions and I'm like, I could do this job and make these people so much money, or I could do it for myself.
Yeah. And you're going to bring up an awesome point. We talk about this all the time of just being a business owner. Everybody wants to be a business owner because it sounds very glamorous, right? Like it sounds awesome. However, like you have to wear so many hats. Like there's so many hats that you have to, you're CFO, CEO, COO, unless you delegate those tasks out and those things. And it's really one of those, you have to bring in the money or you have no business, right? But you also have to do the other things too, the behind the scenes things that aren't glamorous at all, and I think that's where I think a lot of small businesses is where they fail is, people are good at a couple things in their business and they're not able to kind of compartmentalize the position and say, okay, I have to do this, or structure and have a plan. So with you, it's like, you're wearing a lot of other hats. Like, have you hired anyone yet for any positions? Because you're like, I just don't want to do that, like, and delegated that. Or are you really kind of just wearing multiple hats and just putting them on throughout the day?
I had someone who worked for me for, when was it? 3 years. I had a recruiter. And then I did ramp up and hire people last year. And I think too, that was kind of part of the problem was we over leveraged with staffing, thinking that everything was going to ramp up and then it didn't.
Yeah.
And so now it's, it's me and I have, a part-time recruiter that helps me. But even when I had recruiters and a sourcer, I was always still in the weeds of everything. I have a very hard time not being in it. One of my big clients, I have had that relationship since I signed or I opened my business. And so I'm always on the phone with those guys. I'm always making sure they're staffed. I'm checking in with them when we have staff out there. So it's important to me to keep that piece. And, one of the premises I built my business on is relationships. I started my company because I'd been in staffing for so long. When I grew up in staffing, it was about building relationships and long-term client partnerships and referrals. And then, the more I was in it, the more it was, just fill the seat, move on, get a new client, hit your quota, hit the sales calls. This is the number you have to bring in. And I didn't like that. I don't want to do business that way. So when I started, I, reached out to my clients I had worked with in 5.5 years, and I'd always kept that relationship. And those 3 were the first ones to sign contracts. And so I'm still very much in contact with all of them consistently.
And that's what this kind of is. With the podcast and, with all the things that I'm doing, it's really, everything is revolved around community in some sense. And so that's what you are, I think there with the whole sphere of influence or the sales tactics that we use, people can spot them a mile away. And, and people want to be in business with people that they like, that ultimately want the best for their company. And they ultimately see that, like, it's very easy to see. And so, do you think that there is some sort of, community where in recruiting where people are, is that something that people are longing for and businesses are longing for, to do business with people that they actually like and they care about, opposed to being the recruiting company that's gonna be like, hey, we'll do it for cheaper because we'll do it more. And people, I feel like, and stop me if I'm wrong, but people will pay more to know that they're going to be taken care of by somebody that they like, opposed to somebody that's going to be a gunslinger. Is that accurate in the recruiting space?
Absolutely. It's, when I used to train teams, that's the first thing I would say to them is people do business with people they like. Mm-hmm. And if you have that rapport with somebody and they know that you're not just trying to sell them something, you're actually really like invested in them, then they will pay more. They will do business with you. And as long as you're delivering, then that's the easiest way to beat out other vendors. I mean, we went into one of our big accounts and they had been working with the same vendors for years. And we got in there, we saved them money because we're not charging them as much. Our quality is 1,000 times better than what the other company was sending. Our show rate is 1,000 times better than what the other company was sending. We're available to them when people aren't showing up. We're on the phone, getting people to backfill. Like those are the things. And that's how we beat out all the other vendors. And we're their number one vendor now. And it's really important that you take that time to invest. It's unfortunate that some of the larger corporations now are going into like RPO services, where there's nothing wrong with RPO services, but you're outsourcing all your.
What's RPO?
It's a way that staffing companies. It's a company that they'll use like in India where they're outsourcing their recruiting.
Got it.
And so they lose that real client touch, right? Like they're not having that. It's more transactional. It's very transactional staffing. And a lot of the big corporations are doing that now because they saw, a margin where they could make more money and have less overhead. And I think that, long term, it's really the relationships that are going to drive your business. I'm old school. I don't know.
You're kind of like two-sided too, is because you're building this community as far as our relationship with businesses, but also, you have probably people that you're signing on for these contracts that the contract ends and they want to come back to you and be like, well, Suzanne, what do you guys have? Because they trust that you already did one contract and that you're going to take care of them. And people want to know that, hey, I'm not just a paycheck also. Like you really want to try to find a position that works for me. Do you see that kind of it's two-sided?
Yeah, absolutely. I invest in our candidates and some of the roles we do. I mean, we're doing, back of the house kitchen stuff. And, we try to help people who really want to work. That's my biggest thing. If you really want to work, I'll do everything I can to help you. If you're saying you're going to go and you don't show up or you're kind of stringing us along, then, I have less patience. But I mean, I bought people clothes so they can go to work because they didn't have, the clothes to do it. I bought them shoes because they didn't have steel-toed shoes so that they can go to work. I mean, and this is stuff that we're not having them reimburse us for. Like it's literally just because we want to help people as much as we can. Also, if they're, struggling and trying to get back on their feet and they're really dedicated to doing that. So it's a twofold. I have candidates that I placed years ago. I haven't worked with them since, but I still talk to them. When I was at a large corporation, the best compliment I ever received is I had gotten this guy a job and we'd been looking for a long time. He was a really, really great guy, had a family, and I got him a full-time job and he sent me a dozen roses and I literally tear up thinking about it, but he wrote me a card and he said, "Thank you so much for helping me put food on my family's table." And it literally, it's like, that's why I do what I do. Like, that's why I love it so much,
That's an easy way to be obsessed about something when you can see the rewards that aren't just financial. Like financial will only take you so far. Like financial rewards will take you to a point, but there's going to be a point where there has to be more than that, or your body will just be like, I mean, unless you're kind of Wolf of Wall Street and that's like all you want. But for most people, I would say that there's that kind of, you need to have more of a purpose. And when you have a situation like that, where, you're not just helping that one person get a job, you're helping a family, and who knows the effects that you've had on those children for the, rest of their life, that they're actually, they won't even know the hardships that could have happened if you weren't there to help them. And so that's awesome. I think that's what, building a community is about. It's being very servant mindset. And, it's funny though, where how much, we have these, obviously we're in real estate you're in recruiting, and I talk to a lot of people from multiple other ones, but it's crazy how much of a, like, especially business owners like yourself too, we're like this big community, because when the real estate market is affected, it affects the recruiting. When the recruiting affects us, and it's kind of this circle. And so being like entrepreneurs, and last year was super hard in real estate. I mean, like, nobody wanted to buy, like, and I get it. Like, I wouldn't have bought either, the market was crazy. And but I feel like it was a really big pivot point for a lot of these agents, that they kind of got humbled, and I feel it's probably in a lot of the industries too, and even recruiting and other things. You kind of got humbled, and because you're like, oh my gosh, like 2020, 21, I mean, we're printing money, you're just like, yeah, you want to buy a house, it's easy. You want to flip a house, it's easy, it's great, like, but I feel like we got humbled. And what I've seen lately, talking to agents that are making it through, because a lot of agents didn't, and a lot of recruiters didn't make it through either. Like, a lot of recruiters are not in the business, and which opens the door for the next chapter of, hey, when things go back to normal or get better, which they will, you're going to have a better opportunity to take a stronger hold in that marketplace, because there's less recruiters out there, less companies that are out there. So it's like, just make it through. But the one theme I've heard is just getting back to the basics and being humbled by that. With an example is, a lot of real estate agents that have been doing this for a long time, and they're going back to doing open houses. And you're like, no, I've been doing this for a long time. I don't do open houses. What are you talking about?
When was the last time you heard that?
Yeah, it's like, I don't do open houses. What, open houses don't work, but there's so many agents. I mean, we do open houses because you got to go back to the basics and humble yourself and be like, I'm not too big to do an open house and put 50 yards in the sign, 50 signs in a yard. Like, I'm not too big to do that, because it's what it calls for. And so, as far as in the recruiting space, have you kind of had to humble yourself a little bit and be like, okay, we got to get back to the basics? And what are those basics?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because before you said that, I was just thinking that in my head. I think last year was a really big year for me to look back, and it did really humble me a lot. I started in 2018. Full transparency, I killed it and almost made $1 million my first year. That's like unheard of for a small business. COVID hit, we made it through COVID and we're doing fine. And then last year, I mean, we were going on vacations, we were doing all this. Our kids were like spoiled.
I mean, I want to go back to Hawaii. That time when we were in Hawaii, that was like, me and Jen were talking about that. Like, I want to be like, yep, 20 grand Hawaii, let's go.
Exactly.
Like, not a big deal.
Exactly. And it's like, I remember, because we, and that part of, not to like tease, but part of my book is kind of about, it includes that, right? Like, we were in a really tough spot last year. And I remember being in the desert at Walmart, and we were buying some groceries, and, we were tight. We didn't have expendable anything. And there was a woman and her 2 kids and a guy next to me. And I'm always kind of overhearing stuff, purposefully, but she was trying to pay for their groceries, and his card wasn't working. And she was like, the kids are just kind of hanging out, and they're trying to like talk quietly so the kids don't hear. They had to be maybe 7 and 9, not much older than my kids. And she's like, well, what's going on? And they're trying to figure it out. So he went to the car, and I had $40 left on me. It's all I had. And I walked up to her and I was like, hey, I overheard, like, we're just coming out of like, or we're kind of in the same spot. Like, I have 2 little kids, like, please take this. Like, don't worry about it. Like, I almost cried thinking about this woman, and she was so sweet. And she's like, I can't. I'm like, please, like, do it for me. Like, it would make me feel better. Like, just to know that I could help. And I mean, and she wouldn't do it, but I just sat there thinking, like, we're at the end of the day, we're business owners, and some are successful and some are not, but we're all people, and some of us are mothers or, sisters, or we're all like a community in general. And like, we've got to get back to the basics of, one, just helping each other and genuinely caring for each other, and seeing that humanity is really what we need to be fostering. That's what we need to do to build those relationships and communities, and even just to be successful in general. Like, you've got to get back to caring about everyone around you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is definitely when I was coming out the 1 hour community. Like, if you make me cry though, I didn't warn you. If you make me cry, as I've gotten older, it's been a lot easier. And when you start, this is how when you start crying at commercials, like, it's over. Like, it's downhill. You can't go back from that. And Jen's looking over me like, "What's wrong with you?" I was like, "Oh God,
it's me too.
I don't know what to do now." But I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, I think that, and I think people want that now. I think from 2000, through the whole COVID, epidemic, we were forced inside. We were forced away. We were just told, "Hey, keep your distance." And I don't know if we know the ramifications and effects of that completely. But there's usually a pendulum swing on many things, and I think we're getting back. I think we've become so connected via social media, and just in every which way, we become disconnected in a lot of ways. And I think we are starting to see a pivot in that, because just from my community and the Bible studies that we hold, I remember the first one that we had everybody over, and I'm like, well, why, you guys you have literally every sermon on YouTube. Like, you could listen to everything. Like, what do you want? Like, what are you trying to get out of this? And it was all like, I just feel like I don't have anybody. I don't have anyone to share this stuff with. Like, I want my people I can do life with, and I feel like that's how a lot of people are now. And I feel like COVID kind of was I feel like it was already kind of creeping that way, but I feel like that put like an exclamation on it, because we were forced to be apart. And so now I feel like you're exactly right. I mean, I think people are just, wanting that community. And it's I always talk about with the people that I coach, is I just wish I could go back to the days where you would go next door and you would ask for sugar.
Right.
And it wouldn't be weird to knock. Or, like, if somebody came over to my house right now unannounced and knocked on the door, I'd be like, "Why didn't you text me?" You know what I mean? Back in the day, you would be excited.
You're like, "Yes, someone came to visit me."
No, like, "Tom's here. Come on in, Tom." And the kids would come out, like, "Tom's here." And like, you would just be like, but we don't have that anymore. And we've been connected to other ways. It's like, and so it's sad, but I feel like the pendulum is swinging the opposite way. And I think it starts, with an individual, but it's going to be, and this is what we're trying to start within our real estate. And that's all we can do is work in our sector of, in recruiting and real estate. I've worked with some other people that are, they do other mentorship as far as like dancing and things like that, of like, we have all these like communities around them, but in all reality, like we said, we're just one big community. And it's time to start helping each other again. And I think we're going through these times, and we just can't forget it when it gets better, because that's what tends to happen with people, is that it gets better and we forget like what it was like to be hard. I think that, I remember the whole NFTs do you remember NFTs the last couple of years?
Yeah.
Where are they at? We had expendable money. We're to spend on nothing.
Right? And I just saw something. I haven't watched it, but the Netflix movie about GameStop and that whole like thing that happened with all of that. But that's, I mean, crazy money just flowing around, and then it just disappeared. It's just
it's like Beanie Babies. Like, Beanie Babies came out, and there were just people like, we're just gonna spend money on this, and then all of a sudden it's like, that's exactly how Beanie Babies stopped, was that money became tight, and they were just like, well, we're not going to buy a Beanie Baby, like, that's not going to happen. We have to worry about food and stuff. And that's usually what it is. And so we see society go in these rhythms of like, we have expendable money. Like, I mean, Apple just came out with have you seen Apple's, the new, I don't know what they call it, the Pro or whatever. Have you seen that? They're trying to charge $3,500.
We took kids to a movie with some friends on Saturday, and we went to a pizza place afterwards. And there were people in this pizza place with them on, playing it in the pizza place. And I was like, what is happening?
That's Orange County for sure. You guys in Orange County? Like that's 100% Orange County. Like, and like $3,500 for something like that. But I was like, you guys missed the mark because 2 years ago, they've been flying off the shelf because people had so much money,
Yeah.
But now it's kind of like I gotta spend $3,500 on a phone that goes on my head. Like it just doesn't work, And but it's funny, kind of. So what's your take on this year? Like, what are you seeing? I know that the jobs report came out last, and they were anticipating, I think it was 175,000 new jobs, and it ended up being 350,000 new jobs. It was like double. But like, what are you seeing from your data or like in the space of what do you think this year is going to kind of hold?
I think it's going to be an election year. So I think we're going to see, different things are going to start coming out to try to ramp up different areas, right? I think that it's going to be industry specific. I think you're going to see hospitality, especially like the big corporate hospitality companies really coming back as people go back to work, because that's how their cycle is as well, right? Like once Microsoft's on campus full time, their corporate catering company is blowing up because they're having all their usual events, the luncheons, the dinners, the breakfasts, cocktail hours. So then I think you're going to start seeing that really grow again. I think that tech is probably going to stay a little flat for a little while. I think, Elon Musk did a big thing when he cut 50% of that staff, and he's not like in the toilet as far as finances and productivity. So I think that also goes to show, the tech industry was so overinflated. Then what do we do with all the tech people though, right? Are we going to start seeing new startups coming out? Are we going to start seeing other people picking them up? I think it's tough. You've got a lot of big corporations buying some of those smaller tech companies, and it's kind of becoming not so, I'd say, diverse as far as different corporations and like gaming and stuff. You've got the big companies are buying all those little companies. So it's going to be tough, I think, to see where all that lands. But I do think a lot of it's gonna land on the election piece too, because that drives the job market in an election year.
Yeah. What did you think about the whole Elon Musk kind of when he started? Like, do you think that was? I mean, I was cracking up laughing the whole time because he's just going through and being like, we don't need you. Like, and they were like going, I mean, there was just so many people that just were doing nothing and getting paid to do it. And, but what is your insight on that? Like, what were your thoughts?
I think it's funny. I mean, it's not funny because people lost jobs, but I think that he's kind of a quirky guy, right? But I do think that he's a smart guy. He's obviously very intelligent. He can go into something like that and look at it and really dig into it and say, we're just wasting money. Why are we doing this? It's not going to cut productivity. Why would you overspend, millions of dollars if you don't need to? I appreciate the fact that he doesn't go with the flow. He's not with the status quo. He's happy to say, you know what, you don't like this? Leave my platform. Yeah. I commend him for that. I think we need a lot more of that. I think, unfortunately, in this day and age, people are a little bit too complacent to just kind of follow what someone else is doing instead of standing up and being like, I don't agree with that, because they're worried about losing clients or business or money or, I applaud him for that. Him and Dana White. I applaud Dana White too. He's kind of the same. He's like, you know what? Hey, this is not built on this. This is what we do. And if you can't fall in line with that, then find somewhere else.
Yeah, they are trailblazers for sure. What did you think, like, because coming from like a hiring perspective, like, was there any strategicness to what Twitter was trying to do prior, or was it just they were just doing something dumb, or were they just trying to, like, I guess, pad the stats to show that, hey, look, Twitter's a big company, we have all of these employees, like, look at us? Or was it just people using them just being idiots? Like,
I think they padded it, right? Like, they wanted to grow really fast. I think that, even the Twitter's old CEO has come out and done some interviews where he's admitted a lot of the mistakes they made. I think that they did have a lot of people working in spaces to modify things, if you will, that should not have been done. And I think that was probably a lot of the big cuts that he made, because there was a lot of censorship going on with Twitter. The CEO, I used to watch all of the court stuff and all of the the trials on it. And then afterwards, like I said, the old CEO of Twitter came out and admitted to it, so I'm sure a lot of that was part of what he cut. But I'm guessing that Elon went in and started really digging into all the different departments and the finances and said, what are these people really doing? What are these people really doing? And this doesn't make sense. And, that's kind of how he strategically started picking it apart. But I mean, you have these big companies and they have all these people and they're trying to make shareholders happy, right? And so they have to show that they're successful and that they're growing and they're not stagnant and money's coming in. And so I think that, does have part of it too.
Yeah, I think because after that, though, you had a lot of cuts from, Facebook and Meta and all of them. And I don't know if it was partially probably the economy and things like that. But they also saw that he kind of opened that floodgate of being like, oh, you can do this now. You know what I mean? Opposed to like them going against each other and being like, oh, we have more employees. We have more. Look how successful we are. We have so many employees. And now he kind of like opened that floodgate to, to be able to do that. But I also, I'm curious to where the tech jobs are going to be going as far as with AI and kind of how that's going to affect, because especially with censorship, like if they're doing any of those stuff, like there's got to be some kind of AI that's just able to do that and taking someone's job, because no one should be able to be sitting behind a desk and making these decisions based upon their own political like thoughts and things like that. It's got to be something that's got to be, well, this fits into the parameters of what we have decided as a company. But I feel like you probably got a lot of that too. You're hiring someone that's a Democrat or Republican, either way, and they're like, no, I don't believe in that. And then they would just, censor it. And so, but with AI though, have you seen any like changes in recruiting? Like, is there anything that you're just like, oh gosh, because I feel like we hear this all the time in real estate of like, Zillow and all the things like they're trying to replace real estate agents. And it's like, it's harder to replace people than you think when, it becomes from there's a human connection involved, opposed to being like a censorship where it's like, you don't need a human to do that. Like, you don't need a human to do that. But when it has like that connection of like, this is my house, or this is my job, that I want someone that's going to find a job for me. Have you seen anything of like AI in the recruiting space that's kind of really kind of made you think?
I haven't yet. A lot of the stuff that's in the recruiting space is more like platforms. So basically like AI platforms that are helping source resumes, or they say, it's easier for you to find resumes. Which I think, that kind of technology I think is great, especially for new recruiters. Somebody like myself, again, like I feel like I'm like an old school person, but I do it the old fashioned way. I'm passively recruiting on LinkedIn and stuff like that versus just using job boards. I think it'll be interesting though, as these AI technologies come out with these job boards, because I will tell you, these job boards that you post your resumes on and you see all these great commercials about how you can post them for free. They're not free. They're ridiculously expensive. It's such a cost as a recruiter and owning a company to be able to post on these job boards just for other, candidates to see your job postings. And so I'll be curious to see, and now that I'm saying this out loud, maybe a good business idea, an AI platform.
Well, I'm going to stop the recording. We might have to do this.
Proprietary information. But, I'd be curious to see how that's going to affect those types of companies, because they are, back-end software databases, essentially. So will they infiltrate AI? Will a company come out and be able to kind of do it all in one stop? I don't know. I can't imagine ever getting to a point though where you have AI replacing recruiters.
Yeah. I think I feel the same thing about real estate. Like I generally, and I just don't see how that's going to be possible when you have such a face-to-face interaction. And with that, we've seen a lot of, companies that are trying to do it where it's, hey, there's not really much interaction. I think they're like Listing Spark, and there's not just a lot. Like, it's like, hey, we're going to list on the MLS, and then basically it sells itself and things like that. And we'll have, but I think even with like contracts and things like that, people want to know that, hey, listen, is this the best for me and my family? not just am I, who am I going to get on the phone, that's just going to go over the contract. And I feel like it's probably like a lot of the same in recruiting too, is that but I bet you like what you're talking on AI is, I'm sure that some point, and with maybe larger companies, there was a position that would be like resume sorter, like there's this guy he sorts the resume, make sure it has, this, and this in it. And then they go to the next one and whatnot. I'm sure those positions, the ones that aren't front facing to the public, that's the ones that are going to have to worry about, opposed to, I think it's going to be so hard to get rid of real estate agents. I think it's going to be really hard to get rid of recruiters. I think those, just front positions to the basic humans, that are doing these, it's going to be hard to do that in any sense of the way with AI, because unless you make a Terminator that looks, sounds, and can feel, which is the hardest part about a robot. They don't feel, like just the story that you were saying about, the lady trying to buy groceries. Like, there, in some sense, the person that's going to be in front of the public has to have a heart. And if they don't,
to be honest, I think, the resume sorters and whatnot, those are probably the worst positions you can have AI in, because one of the things, and honestly, one of the reasons that companies and people should work with recruiters is because we're able to look at somebody's and I say this all the time, like a resume is a blueprint of someone's experience. It's not everything. You can't just look at a resume and check the boxes and say, oh, this is going to be a great candidate for me to interview. There's so many different skills that are transferable and translatable. And, part of that problem with some of the companies that they do use, the resume back office applicant tracking systems, and they have that set up where resumes will come in, and if it doesn't meet these exact keywords, then they move on and pass on people. So it's really, I think, one of the best reasons to work with agencies is because we can look at a resume, we can really dig into that candidate's experience and be like, hey, look, it doesn't say these 3 things you're looking for, but it has these 5 other things you didn't even know you need for this position. And this is why you should talk to this candidate, or this person has been in this job, which literally their skill set transfers to what you're looking for. So this is why you need to talk to them. And I think that, that's a big reason that we also need to be careful with AI. It can make things too transactional for the worst too, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of it.
What's that? You're not a huge fan?
Because I think it's dangerous. I don't think we know enough about it. I think that people get excited about something and they jump all in head first. And then, 3-4 years from now, we're going to be saying, oh, wait, we didn't realize that, or we didn't anticipate that. And now how do we fix it? Or, in different areas.
I think you look at a great example of exactly what you're saying is the mass production of food. And we thought, oh my gosh, we can put this stuff in there and it can increase the shelf life for, oh my gosh, 3 more months. And like, we can get it out to more people. And you're like, okay, great. That's awesome. Let's do it. And then it's like 20 years later, we have like a obesity epidemic because we didn't realize all the stuff we were putting in there was killing us, and so that, it would be interesting if we could go in the future and, and they'd be like, well, what shouldn't we do? If looking back and they're like, don't do AI, don't do it, whatever you do not do AI, because we don't know the ramifications of it. And we won't know until that happen. And then we're going to look back and be like, my dad's a super, he's love him to pieces, but he won't even go to the self-checkouts. Like, he's like, no, that's not even AI. That's like where AI started. They're like, we'll just have people do it themselves. And he's like, nope. And so I think, it's scary to think about, because after the whole Maui fires, because I know you're an author, right? Like, they literally had a book out the day after.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And they're like, yeah, obviously AI wrote that, obviously. And so I just think about the news is already jacked up, and we're in control of that. Imagine if we're not in control and people just it's so scary of what possibly could happen. But
what was that movie that came out and it was either like late 90s or early 2000s. And it was something about how it's not Minority Report, but they created AI and they had, robot police forces. And then there were like the humans living in the subway tunnels. And then you have
I remember. I
all
know
of
what you're
the
talking about.
robots living above them. And
Yeah.
I mean, I think about stuff like that. I'm like, what if that could like really happen? Like, we don't know, what if they do get smarter than us and can, override the systems we write to control them, if you will. And I mean, you just never know.
You're going to have one of the master geniuses like Elon that like, they think they have we have the kill switch. Like nobody else knows we have it. And you're like, and then it's going to get to that point and they're going to be like, and it just doesn't work. And you're going to be like, you're screwed now. Like, like you can't outsmart a robot. Like they have no emotions. Like you're good. Like, so I don't know what that movie is.
Is that people can control stuff. Like, I mean, look at the new electric cars. They just signed in that starting in 2026, there's a kill switch on every single electric car you own. So anywhere in the world, the government can shut off your car.
Yeah, I think they're doing it if you have insurance. I think if your insurance lapse, they just like shut it off. But I mean, all that stuff is like, it's so funny because I mean, when we had the cold up in like Minnesota and like even Chicago and places like that, like they couldn't start because batteries don't work well in the cold. And so they can't go across the country. And so I think they just have so much work to do in that side. And so, I mean, I'm definitely pro bringing all electric, like all energy back to America, because I feel like the jobs would go crazy if they're we're opening the pipelines, we're opening them up, and they'd be like, I mean, jobs would go insane. I feel like, I mean, I always say that like no matter what with electricity, like electrical vehicles, all you found, I'm not impressed because all you found is a better way to transport gas. Because how are you making that electricity? Like you just don't have you don't have the trucks dropping them off at the gas station. No, it's just going by a wire. You just found a better way to use gas, and fossil fuel.
I always think it's funny when you see them jumping the electric cars with gas generators. I'm like, really? Come on.
This is where like AI robots are going. This is going to be easy.
Right?
This is going to be like, this is it. Like this. These are the guys we got to take. Yeah, I feel like there won't be a Terminator situation. Like they'll just like take us over, and you're like, I thought they were supposed to be like there was going to be that savior. They're like, no, they killed him real early. He was trying to charge his car with like his electric vehicle, and just came behind him, took him out. It was pretty simple,
right? That's funny. It's really interesting to see what happens the next year. I do agree with you that if they brought that pipeline back, the amount of jobs we lost when they shut that down in the Midwest and how that affected so many people. Yeah. It was devastating for a lot of people.
When you think everything that we know of is diesel and gas, you can't get rid of, any of that stuff. And you think like, okay, well, why is food going up? Well, if diesel goes up and gas goes up, how do you think stuff got there? Like everything, why is wood going up? Well, how do you think they cut down the trees? How do you think they took that wood and took it to Home Depot? Well, diesel. So if that goes up, it automatically is going to. And so to me, I'm like, unless you have a solution, I always tell this to my kids all the time, and my employees too. Don't come to me with a problem. Come to me with a solution, because if you have a problem, like, what do you want me to do? Fix it for you? Like, go figure out the solution and come back. Like, what is it? It's way better that way. And I don't think they have the solution. They have like here's a solution. Or like, that's not going to work. Like, maybe we should keep this intact until we find the best solution. I don't know what that is. I'm not smart enough. I will.
I mean, I have some ideas I could share with them if they'd like.
Water, right? Can't they just no?
There's a Porsche. Is it Porsche? I think Porsche is looking at creating a water-driven. They're partnering with a company that's looking at running cars with water.
I think there was a. Have you ever looked at the conspiracy about the guy about water? He Oh, look at that. Look at inventor that created a hydro, engine. And basically he was sitting down. He was sitting down with the people that he was basically, I think they were part of the government and they were talking about it. And then all of a sudden he started choking. They were sitting down eating and ended up having a heart attack right there. And the last words was, "You guys poisoned me." Yeah, look it up. It's crazy. I can't remember the guy's name, but crazy. Go in that rabbit hole. It's like, yeah, no, that's not good. That doesn't make, but the problem is that like, man, we're in a drought here. I don't want anyone fueling up on water here in Austin. Like we're in a drought still. Our lakes too. So it's like, then that'll be one other thing. It's like,
yeah, I mean, there's never really like one solution that's going to fix it all, right? I mean, look at solar. We don't have enough power in any of our grids to make every single car electric. We just don't. I mean, it'll cause rolling black, and they've even said that it'll cause rolling blackouts to the entire country. So how do you push for initiatives to make all cars electric by a specific year if we can't even sustain it?
Mm-hmm. Or they have a plan. They want it all to go down. We're going down a conspiracy rabbit hole here today. This is why I couldn't be a recruiter, because I'd be asking, I would be like, so, what do you think about that whole hydrogen car vehicle? What about flat Earth? Like, do you think it's flat? Really? We go to the moon? Like, I'd be like, don't hire him. Like, he believes we went to the moon. Where were the stars in that video? Who was taking the camera? Who was taking those photos? Like, yeah. So I couldn't be in recruiting. These are the things I can't talk about with my clients because I would not have a business. I appreciate you coming on so much, Suze. It's always good. I'm excited to see you this summer. I know we're taking Maverick gets his license, and so it's nice. We're driving, so I'm just gonna sit in the back. I'm just gonna sit in the back and just let him drive and be like, you can get your hours in for sure. So I'm excited to see you guys and come out and hang out. But I appreciate you being here and giving us some insight on your obsession, which is recruiting. And if anyone needs to get a hold of you or wants to get a hold of you who's watching this, that, hey, I need a job or I need to hire somebody, how should they get a hold of you?
So you can email me at Suzanne@BlakeRyanConsulting.com. You can go to my Instagram, which is Suze_Justice. And then LinkedIn is also, I have my Blake Ryan Consulting page and my Suzanne Justice page as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And I'm sure we'll have you on here some other time, talk about, the job market and things like that. You're going to be our go-to in this community for that. So thanks for joining us, everybody. We'll see you next time. What's up?